For Friday afternoon. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Noelle Doherty. I'm the head of the upper school, and it's delighted to be able to welcome everyone this afternoon. Our panelists, welcome back. I personally wish that I had time to meet with every one of you, because the one thing that I've learned in my 2 years here at Cranbrook, being a neophyte, is that Cranbrook is about its people and the stories. Even though we are surrounded in beauty, and that's certainly a contributing factor, it's really all about the people and the relationships. And so I wish we had time to hear all of that. But send me an email and let me know. I love hearing about it when you guys come back. To our students, thank you for taking some time out this Friday afternoon and welcoming our alumni back to their old stomping grounds. You are very smart for being here. As we go through this special event, please engage and start formulating questions as the introductions take place. Having access to this panel is irreplaceable. And so I really applaud you for spending some time this afternoon with us. All right, I thought we would start the afternoon off quickly with an introduction to what this afternoon is about and where all of our alumni are coming from. This group is coming from the Detroit Homecoming and have been engaged in this activity for a couple of days now. Detroit Homecoming is in its 5th year and was conceived as a 3-day invitation-only event designed to attract the brightest and best Detroit expats, meaning these are individuals with roots in the Detroit, Michigan area, back to the city. The goal of the Detroit Homecoming is to share Detroit's story and encourage them to use whatever resources they have at their disposal. And this could be in the form of ideas, investments, business development, to help build on Detroit's momentum. And so it was conceived as a partnership between Crain's Business Detroit and the city administrators as a way to draw some of the most talented and entrepreneurial-minded people who have ties to Detroit back to our city. Since its inauguration in 2014, Detroit expats have committed and invested more than $300 million back into city projects and businesses. So in front of us, we have a Cranbrook connection, but there's a larger Cranbrook connection to Detroit Homecoming. Cranbrook Kingswood alumni have made powerful contributions to Detroit Homecoming and are a formidable force in reinvesting in our city of Detroit. At the very first homecoming in 2014, the welcome was delivered by Heisman Trophy winner and Rhodes Scholar Brigadier General Pete Dawkins, class of 55. And for all of you here, and hopefully maybe you guys can come back for this, we're going to be celebrating Mr. Dawkins for his 60th anniversary of his Heisman win at our Friday Night Lights football game, which is our homecoming game. And yes, we play football under the lights once a year. Also, other Cranbrook Kingswood alumni who've come back and contributed to Detroit Homecoming include Pandora radio founder Tim Westergren, class of 84, Groupon co-founder Brad Keywell, class of 87, ABC reporter Bob Woodruff, class of 79, Internet infrastructure pioneer Jay Adelson, class of 88. They've all participated in Detroit Homecoming and have been part of the panels there. Overall, since 2014, over 100 Cranbrook Schools alumni have been invited back to be part of Detroit Homecoming. So sitting in front of you is Detroit Homecoming number 5. And these are all Cranbrook Schools alumni, some of the area's most successful expats. They started off the week with a dinner at Little Caesars Arena and have spent the last 3 days in class. No, I'm kidding. They haven't been. A little bit. But what they have been exposed to, they've spent these days hearing from local policymakers, experts, entrepreneurs, organizers, project coordinators, just bringing back to life Detroit and what has all taken place here. They are trailblazers in their individual fields, and we'll have a great opportunity for the breakout sessions for you to get access to them. They have a reputation of being opinion makers and problem solvers, and their voice has been a welcome addition to Detroit Homecoming. So it is without further ado that I turn things over to Mr. Shaw and Mrs. Post as they introduce them. But thank you for coming back. We are very fortunate to have you take time with our students. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Doherty. Welcome, panelists, most of whom are on one of my sheets. I had to write your name down at some point when you were a student here and pass it along. And welcome to all of our student guests. The special mix and magic of Cranbrook that seems sometimes to you to be so pressurized is one that they have all lived, and they have the exciting role of being able to share some time with you today. And what we'd like to do is jump right into the important sharing and the excitement of you being able to talk to them. So we're going to introduce our panelists one by one. The plan of the afternoon is for you to hear from them. We're going to ask them a question, and then we're going to split up into the groups that are exciting and fun for you. So we'll go really down the line here, and we'll start with Francie Hermelin. Julie, yeah. Yeah, there's your sister. So,
not here yet.
Julie is the president of Two Muse, which is a media and video entertainment concept. And she is in the business of filmmaking. She's an entrepreneur and activist, and her work has been nominated for major awards. Her mission is to produce social networking for social change. She produces philanthropic opportunities, especially for women, and she produces philanthropic opportunities primarily, especially for people who are most vulnerable in our society.
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead.
We're actually not going to go down the line. We're going to jump around a little bit. And so I'm going to introduce one of my classmates. Jeff Goodman is here from Boston. And he's going to be part of the finance breakout. And he's with Walker & Dunlop. It's a national commercial real estate finance firm. He has a responsibility for spearheading the company's coverage of large institutional. Come on in. Ms. Wall is here. If we could get her tent card.
You're just in time. We just got started.
Oh, you're down at the other end, darling.
Oh.
Sorry. So, Mr. Goodman, he launched the company's proprietary capital development, including establishing bridge lending and specialty finance programs. He got his undergraduate and law degrees both from the University of Michigan. Go Blue.
Go Blue.
I'm going to introduce David Rockhind. Put your hand up there, David, who's the founder and creative director of Ground Media. David is in film production. He has been in the business of creating social change through video. His production company produces social impact storytelling. David has embedded himself in vulnerable communities. He spent months within tubercular communities around the world to bring attention to the disease, the scourge of tuberculosis. He is now bringing that expertise to causes for social change, and we're thrilled to have you here, David.
So I'm going to introduce Ms. Deborah Wall, who is down on the end down there, if you could give a wave, Deborah. And she's another person who was running around these halls when I was here, except for she was just a little nipper, as we called them, back in the day. But she has been, since that time, she has had jobs all over the world and seen many different corners of it. After attending Wellesley, Deborah went to Wharton, and she developed a passion for people and cultures that led her to a career in marketing. She worked on 3 continents, for 3 industries, and 4 different automotive brands. And then for Pulte Homes, for McDonald's, and now for Cadillac. She specializes in re-energizing legacy brands, companies that have been around for a long, long time and need a fresh new take on their branding. She uses consumer insights, technology, data, and cultural change to make that growth happen. And she also serves on the board of Groupon. Hi.
They're really
And Cranbrook.
I'm going to introduce Katie McCann. She's a startup consultant and advisor working out of San Francisco. She has been an advisor to executives. She is an angel investor. She's been coaching startups in giving them the right way to market and market to scale. And she has 20 years of experience in building and managing product software and marketing teams. She works particularly in artificial intelligence, machine learning, automotive and media publishing, and Katie earned her BA from the University of Pennsylvania. Thank you, Katie.
So I want to introduce Adam Pagoda. Mr. Pagoda, can you give a wave? Adam has just recently relocated here from New York. Is it fair to say that? He's in the process. He joined Pagoda Companies as a director of acquisitions to find new opportunities for growth in the self-storage business, big business, other real estate classes. Before returning to his self-storage roots, how he grew up knowing about this business. Adam was the director of New York acquisitions for East End Capital, he spent 8 years with East End Capital, and this is $1.5 billion of office and multifamily properties, Adam? That's interesting. Before joining East End, Adam was an analyst at Rubin Companies. He got a lot of good experience there, and he went to Prudential Mortgage Capital Company in San Francisco, worked as an analyst, underwrote approximately $1 billion in loans. And his BS in finance and real estate came from the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania.
Jeffrey Middlestadt comes to us from High Point, North Carolina, where he's getting weather updates every couple of minutes. From that seat in North Carolina, however, Jeffrey is all over the world in terms of catering, beginning to curate new ideas in filmmaking, in multimedia productions. He founded Wild Sides, which is a nonprofit dedicated to producing educational and documentary media. He was Davidson College's first sustainability expert. He has had major contracts with corporations and the United States government in terms of projects on green building and renewable energy. He is managing a number of partnerships in sustainable manufacturing and has served on a number of government groups advising on the subject of sustainable manufacturing. Welcome back, Jeffrey.
So I'm going to introduce Ethan Orley. He came to us, came here this week from Nashville. But Ethan started his real estate career here in this area, working for a family-based business, real estate, residential development, and after he got his master's in real estate finance from NYU, he started to work in Manhattan, or with a Manhattan-based company to acquire distressed commercial real estate debt. And then in 2009, he co-founded his own company, starting in Nashville with another partner, is that correct? BNA Associates and Oliver Hospitality. So he leads development and operations of their projects, and he's got a bachelor's degree in environmental policy from the U of M, from University of Michigan, and a master's in real estate finance, as I said, from NYU.
That was Katie. That was Katie Siegel? That was Ethan. Well, I'm gonna transition over to Josh Siegel, who's separated from Katie by one seat. There we go. Well,
You're right in the middle.
Good transition. Josh is a research scientist out of MIT. Josh has started a lab in the Internet of Things at MIT. He won the grand prize for creativity and entrepreneurship at MIT, the Lemelson Prize, a few years ago. He does extensive research in the area of connectivity. He develops architectures for secure and efficient connectivity, applications for sensed data and intelligent diagnostics. He got his start, he made his first driverless car when he was on the robotics team here some years ago. And good news, he has recently won a seat to start a program in a special research lab at Michigan State.
Why don't you introduce Katie?
Then, why not grab that opportunity to introduce Katie, who met one another here at Cranbrook. Yes, yes, one of many very successful.
I was the connector.
Homecoming bonfire.
They were future expats. Katie works in McKinsey and Company's Boston office in advising advanced industrial, electronics, and basic materials clients on growth strategy. Katie, basically, her job is to answer a company who says, how are we going to make this product, how are we going to create this product, and how are we going to make it profitable, and where are we going to make it profitable after we've spent millions of dollars on it? And Katie enters figures, and she tells them how to make that product profitable. She's from Grand Rapids, and we are thrilled to know that she and Josh are going to make their homes here.
So I'm going to introduce Casey Shane here. Hello. Casey came from Seattle area, Washington, and he works for Google. Specifically the Google Cloud platform. And he's a cloud computing professional based out of Seattle who he's very happy to see that Detroit is making a comeback. So he was looking forward to coming back here. He focuses on landing cloud opportunities through independent and software vendors and systems integration partnerships. And before Google, he worked at Microsoft, Oracle, Salesforce. He's been around the block a couple times in this industry. And in his spare time, he goes salmon fishing.
Sharon Stolberg. And you might know some of her nieces who've gone through here, Rothsteins. And Sharon is the Senior Director of Global Business Development at the Museum of Natural History in New York City, the American Museum of Natural History. Her job is to ask the question of who will come to see our exhibitions. What do I need to do to make this museum exhibition profitable? How will we make this exhibition explode out in the headlines? And how do we keep the doors of a museum open by bringing in amazing exhibitions?
So we've got the last two introductions, I think. It's perfect because it's the guys who have been with us since the first time we did this panel. Brian Razak I'm going to introduce, and Charlie's going to introduce Matt Nosenchuk. And I think that we'll have had everybody then. Yep. And so Brian Razak is here. He came to the conference from Baltimore. He is a record-holding 5-year Detroit Homecoming attendee and poster boy. They featured him in a big splashy piece at the beginning of the book because he has dug into the Detroit scene, in a very hands-on way. Started buying real estate and fixing up homes in the Detroit area. People in his family noticed that he was doing a good job and turning a pretty penny with this operation. And so investors started coming to his store, and he's been involved in that. But it is not his day job. He's a tech guy, and he he created a platform called Social Toaster that leverages the power of social media in a branding and marketing format. It gamifies social media marketing, really. So he is a serial entrepreneur in marketing, technology, and social media expert. You will sit by him if you want to become one of those. Brian founded the platform Social Toaster, and so the name of his real estate company is Detroit Residential Properties, and he has some fellow expats who have also gotten interested in that with him, so he's leading the charge on that. And he got people invested in 3 main neighborhoods in the Detroit area: the Russell Woods neighborhood, East English Village, and Mexican Town. So the city is starting to see the fruits of his labors right away. Thanks for coming, Brian.
Oh, and we moved back. We moved back.
You moved back? Oh, he moved back.
And I want to introduce Matt Nosenchuk, our final introduction, and we would like to get Matt Nosenchuk back. He is often invited into conversations both nationally and regionally in the area of politics and law and government. He has had senior roles in the Obama administration. He's worked in the White House, and he works among other kinds of roles. He has served the American Jewish community and with the National Security Council. He has worked with the State Department and the Department of Homeland Security and the Justice Department. Matt has practiced law for many years, and he has served many of our politicians and consults in the area of civil rights. He is a national civil rights expert. He has received a number of awards for distinguished service, and has made common cause with those whose civil rights are in need of support, underrepresented LGBTQT community, and we are very, very thrilled to have you here. Thank you very much, Matt.
So now you all know a little bit more about our panelists, and we're going to apologize in advance for how quick this has to be, because obviously we want to get into the breakout sessions, and then we can really drill down into both reactions to the Detroit homecoming, but also I'm sure you guys are interested in more career type, educational type issues, things about how do you get to do what you do today. So we're going to try to leave as much time as that. So I'm going to ask our panelists to be as brief as they possibly can be. And it's a tough question to be brief on because they covered a lot of things in this conference. But we're going to ask each of the panelists to give their reaction to the question that, from the particular lens of your industry and what you do, your area of expertise, what stood out for you about this conference? And some of them have been to the conference before, and some of them are first timers. But to get what resonated the most for you at this year's conference, and looking at it from your area of expertise. So we're going to start at the end of this, and we're going to pass the mic down, and everybody's going to do their minute-and-a-half elevator speech on this.
They're going to have a bell for us, right?
No.
And I'll be really quick because I actually was only able to attend the first dinner, but the key point I think came very clearly in the presentation by Dan Gilbert with Josh Lubar, who is the founder of StockX. Do you know StockX? Yes, I'm sure you guys do. So fabulous company, basically, and that's the type of companies that Detroit wants to be attracting. Their key point was you're only limited by what you can imagine, which ties back to my career in marketing. It is often only about what you can imagine the future to be, and then how do you build it, and how do you find the tools to build it, and then how do you find a value equation so that you're actually able to convince people that you can make money off of that as well. That to me was absolutely fabulous about the conference, because if you were in Detroit 10 years ago, 5 years ago, it's a very different place from what it is today. And it's driven by people who could imagine that difference in that trajectory. And you guys are at a key point, so we're hoping that you're going to imagine a lot and be back and forth to help, as we all are.
Hi, Jeff Goodman. What was most interesting for me was to see Detroit as a boomtown. When I was growing up here, when Susan and I were in high school, Detroit was on the decline. And every story was about how people were leaving, and how money was coming out, and how the city was decaying. And to be back in the city and seeing such kind of vibrant growth in a very tangible way in terms of major real estate development, in terms of people on the street, in terms of stores and vibrancy in restaurants, it was incredibly invigorating for me. My company has made some substantial investments in downtown. We just opened up an office in Bloomfield Hills a couple weeks ago. So we were always all over the country, but we never had anything local. So it's very fun to now be able to be really a part of the kind of growth which we see as continuing in this area for the long term.
So one very specific opportunity for Detroit that really resonated with me was also from the opening dinner at Little Caesars. And this was a conversation between Mayor Duggan and Bill Ford Jr. And they were talking about the future of mobility and things like motorized scooters and self-driving cars. And I come from the Bay Area. I live in San Francisco, and San Francisco has a very ironic sort of love-hate relationship with the tech scene. There's a lot of hatred towards Lyft and Uber for things like, cars double parking and blocking streets. And the hatred is directed at Lyft and Uber, but the real problem is that the city isn't adapting, right? Transportation is changing, but, things like, taking away parking spaces so that Lyfts and Ubers have places to pull over and pick up people. The city's really, really slow in adapting to things like that. So I think they were talking about a real opportunity for Detroit, as Detroit is rebuilding its infrastructure, to really be at the forefront in the future of things like self-driving cars. So they were talking about like timing. They have like some places they have like fancy new traffic lights that are all sort of computer controlled and software controlled and could be, adapted for self-driving cars and things like that. So I think that could really help Detroit as, they're competing with Silicon Valley for talent in the self-driving space, really being supportive of those industries.
So before working at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, I worked at Sesame Workshop, which is the organization that produces Sesame Street in the United States and around the world. And one of the things that has been the thread throughout my career is the educational space, but that you cannot educate children without engaging them and entertaining them at the same time. So I thought it was interesting throughout this past few days that this idea of culture and art and history and entertainment and education was highlighted. We had the opportunity to hear a presentation from Robin Terry, who is the chairwoman of the Motown Museum in Detroit, and they are expanding and talking about different ways, not just to build a museum as an institution, but an educational space and a space for entrepreneurs to talk about different ways to bring life back into the city. And they'll have a space for live music again downtown. And I think there is an interesting way to look at education. Dinosaurs everybody loves, but you can teach so many things through dinosaurs. You can teach physics and biology and all different things. And I think as Detroit continues to develop, I think it's interesting to keep an eye on the culture and the history in the museum community, because society is really healthy when it has a very healthy cultural scene. And I'm excited about that, but I'm also weary, because I think there's a lot of talk about real estate. There's a lot of talk about schools, and I think it will be great when we can come back to homecoming and really hear about somebody who is engaged in philanthropy and culture.
So this is my third time coming to the Detroit homecoming, and I have to say that each year that I come back, I'm incredibly blown away by the amount of change that's happened in just 1 year. It's very impressive, but I sort of feel like the more that it changes, the more that some of the harder issues become revealed. I mean, you take away some of the big blight and you open a new arena and create a new downtown neighborhood, and it's great and it's wonderful, and it's happening at a pace that I think nobody really imagined. But there are still these fundamental challenges that remain, and for me, what resonated was discussion that was had that we had with the head of the Ford Foundation and the head of the NAACP about the role that race plays in Detroit's recovery, and the concern that the recovery in Detroit not follow recovery in some other cities that have kind of left out or pushed out people of color, who, like in San Francisco, there's not very much space there anymore, or Boston. So how to make that recovery here inclusive of as many Detroiters as possible, and how to tap into that which is most intrinsic to Detroit's character, which includes the spirit of innovation, it includes culture, it includes people who live there and children who need to be educated. And so making that recovery inclusive and keeping it connected as possible to the core strengths of the city is a huge opportunity, and it's a huge challenge.
I'm excited to see kind of the gravity towards the technology industry here. Back 20 years ago, 10 years ago, if you were from here and went to school here, like a lot of you and a lot of talent, there's a ton of talented people in the general vicinity here. And if you wanted to go work in the technology industry, you headed for the coasts, and primarily the West Coast. And I was really excited to see there's starting to become a vibrant venture capital community here, where people like Dan Gilbert are building funds and investing in startups, not only the one that was mentioned before, but others. And then even some traditional Silicon Valley VCs have a little beachhead here, and those will only get bigger. So I spoke with several people this week on their ideas, their startup ideas, and there's some good ones. And so I think there's a real gravity and an incentive to kind of stick around the Detroit area and build your technology future here. So before it was sort of isolated to the coast. So pretty excited about that.
It was awesome. When I went to school here, I used to go down to St. Andrews Hall for my punk rock shows, and seeing the places you can go before and after now around there, and to see the tech companies that are coming in is amazing. But I too worry about the culture of the city, the culture of all the neighborhoods that we need to let lead us as we grow, because it's their city. It's our city. And there are great examples, and I got to see some, so I'm going to name a couple here. April Anderson, good cakes and bakes, delicious, first of all, organic, and in a neighborhood where they didn't have even a UPS drop-off, so she's a UPS drop-off for the neighborhood. So that kind of social entrepreneurship. Has anybody heard of the Artist Village? You have? Go. It's incredible. It's right next to Blight Busters, and was part of the Blight Busters work in John George. Definitely go there. They have a garden in the back to teach kids that, potatoes don't come from McDonald's. So things like that. The urban farms that are happening, that are sprouting up, that's what gives me the most hope, is that all of this is happening. So let's capture the social entrepreneurs that are already there in all the neighborhoods and bring them in and help us move forward. So.
Yeah, echoing some of the other statements, I'm a big believer that stories and narrative means something more than just emotion, that it actually drives behavior, it motivates change. And one of the things that I noticed this week is that a lot of the narrative that is being told is about the future and the opportunity. I think it's important to remember that this isn't a blank slate, as other people have mentioned, that this is a interesting place and a cool place and a place people want to be because of the history, because of the people, that when you whatever point in time that you enter Detroit, there's a different story to tell, and that we shouldn't lose that if, we don't want to Disneylandify Detroit and make it something that, make it something new that has no resemblance to what has brought us to where we are today. Take the point of culture and the point of people, and including those voices in the story, including those voices in what Detroit will become, and including those people in building Detroit is a crucial thing to making sure that 10 years down the road, the story of Detroit isn't one of missed opportunity, but one of having developed and revitalized a city in the right way.
I think I was most struck as well by the same conversation that Matt mentioned, when essentially those speakers mentioned we don't want to make the same mistakes that Boston, New York, and San Francisco have made, where essentially these cities become a playground for the rich and the people that lived here originally have been pushed out. And thinking about, moving from New York, where essentially that was my job. I was supposed to find the next cool neighborhood, try to buy cool buildings there, and essentially was almost part of the problem. And moving back here, it's thinking, how can you be part of the solution and create equitable solutions for the existing community and grow the real estate community and improve the city in a way where it's not just a playground for the rich like, Boston, New York, and San Francisco.
So if we're looking at this from the context of sort of challenges and opportunities, the biggest challenge in my mind from the tech sector is how do you balance rebuilding and reinvention, right? Detroit got us to here with the automotive industry. It got us here with bending sheet metal. And it's going to take us forward with things like software and different innovation hubs. Casey talked about high tech emerging in Detroit. And so this is something that we need to be very careful with how we balance, right? We need to be respectful of the past. We need to be looking towards the future, but also understanding that sometimes history is history for a reason, and that it can't be what we do forever. From the perspective of opportunities, I think that there's a lot of opportunities for non-monetary investment. So I think Sharon was talking about art and philanthropy and how we can invest in that manner. And so it's not just cash, it's not buying buildings, it's giving time, it's giving thought to how do we make Detroit a better place.
So I lived in New York for 10 years, and I moved to Nashville 4 years ago. And Nashville's a hot city right now because it's got a hook. It's got music, and it had its own TV show until they canceled it. Nashville's exciting because there's energy and people are talking about it. And Detroit has that same level of energy, except there's a big difference. Detroit is a major metropolitan city that has incredible infrastructure, that has 5 million plus people and one of the wealthiest. There's obviously wealthy enclaves, but there's just a lot of wealth in general, and there's major corporations based out here. Nashville's a small city. So when I came here, and I felt this every single time I've been back and to see family, that Detroit is really one of the most unique places to kind of deploy your business and your capital and your time, because it's probably one of the last, besides maybe Memphis, it's one of the last large cities where you can get involved and make an incredible impact. And because the infrastructure exists, you can get there in a much faster way. And if you want to grow a business, which is what we do, you can get there and leverage that. What's exciting for us, and we do hotels and we do boutique lifestyle properties, is that you can be a placemaker here, and you can do that in ways that are not possible in the LAs, the Chicagos, the New Yorks, the major metropolitan areas. And so I'm excited about just laying a stake down and doing things similar to what the Foundation Hotel did, which is really make it cool to go downtown and say, I want to stay there. And when you stay someplace and talk about it that way, that is an important piece of the puzzle, because if you can't create excitement, that doesn't lead to other people wanting to show up. And showing up is half the issue. And we're almost, in some cases, for my business, almost kind of late to the game. Everyone's talking about it. There's so much excitement, and we can talk about that in a smaller group setting, but we have an opportunity to really do something really, really interesting, and that's really what the pleasure is seeing that excitement.
I think similar to Ethan, I'd been to a talk with Larry Summers, who was the head of Harvard for a while, a pretty famous person, and we were having a conversation about what would be the best thing that high talented people could do. You know, a lot of folks from major universities or institutions, they go to the big cities and contribute there. And one of the things he had said was the best thing you can do is go to where you're from and actually work there and build something new. And I feel like the Detroit homecoming was a great example of how much passion there is of people who do want to come home and make a meaningful difference in a place where they have an appreciation of what it was, the history, like Josh said, but also a vision for what it could be and know how to build on it. So I think for me, it was just useful to see hundreds of alumni that were so excited to be there and invest and help and back. It's been a great event to attract new talent to the city who know its history.
Hello, everyone. The last presenter at Homecoming read this great poem, and it was called Just Say Hi. And I was so struck by it. And she's a woman that's been living in Detroit her entire life. And she talked about the lost children. The lost children whose parents grew up in Detroit, like mine. They went to Mumford and Central and then moved when they got married into the suburbs and took their children. And I'm one of those children. I went to Cranbrook, I was born around here, and it was so profound the way she talked about my generation as this lost generation of Detroiters who are now finding their way back to their parents' home and aren't saying hello. Aren't saying hello to the people that have been there and have been stewards of the city and been making their way. And so when I think about, and I'm a filmmaker and I use filmmaking as a way for social impact and social change. And what I do is I try to listen deeply to the people I speak with so that we can co-create a narrative where I can use my expertise to elevate and shape their stories for greater impact. And so as I was listening to everything that I heard in Homecoming, I heard a lot about innovation and change and making anew. But what I also heard was people who said, co-create with me in this home. Help me shape my story, my entrepreneurship, my vision in a way that can raise the stakes and raise our community together so that we can, in a way, heal a little bit of this history that happened when my parents left because of for a variety of reasons, and so that my generation and your generation has an opportunity to create a holistic experience between what Detroit as a city is and these suburbs have opportunity for, and that you can now not be such a divide. I did go down to Detroit when I was a Cranbrook student, much to my parents' chagrin, and I went to St. Andrews, and I went to clubs, and Detroit, you wouldn't go down to Detroit. But now how do we actually create an extension and a relationship between these two places that is respectful and can move forward in a positive way?
So I'm one of a handful of people that have been to Detroit Homecoming every single year since it started in 2014. And what's interesting to me about this year versus even going all the way back, like the reason Detroit Homecoming was necessary is because, or the mission behind it was to get interesting people that left to come back and try to do something interesting in Detroit because there was a deficiency of interesting things. And what gets me excited is interesting people doing interesting things. Like every single one of these panelists up here is super interesting, right? Every guest, every person who came back for Homecoming is, I've been to many, many conferences. The fact that you can go to any single person and in the first 5 minutes realize that these people are fascinating, right? What's interesting about, so this year, the difference is, 5 years ago, there was nothing. Now, there's stuff I can't even, do you guys know what a velodrome is? Right? Who knows what a velodrome is? I just assumed you guys would all know because my Lyft driver was like, what is that thing, right? So apparently now there's there's 28 other velodromes in the country. You have one here in Detroit. It's a racetrack. It's an indoor elevated racetrack for bicycles, right? Acoustically, maybe not the best choice for a venue, but like super cool. And part of the reason I was late is I just got off a tour, and one of the places we visited was an urban apiary, right? Like there's a company that's raising bees and making organic, like whole raw honey in the middle of the city, right? Crazy, right? There's a guy that I met who, one of the businesses that's here locally, and he's mass producing cricket protein. Like he's raising crickets, grinding them into a powder, and selling them as an alternative food source. I don't know how I feel about that long term, but like super cool, right? And so I think the message of all of this is that when I was a student here, you guys you have this idea that maybe there's like 4 or 5 career paths. Maybe you're going to be a doctor, maybe you're going to be an engineer, maybe you're going to be a lawyer, right? But you guys are now surrounded by city where people are doing the most batshit crazy things and they're making money off of it. Sorry. It's super cool, and I would encourage you guys to get out and go see the velodrome, go visit the urban apiary, go meet the guy who's making cricket protein powder. Maybe try it. It's an adventure. It tastes nutty. So anyway, that's my takeaway for you guys. It's like I'm excited for you that you now have these options that I think when we were going here just couldn't possibly have envisioned. And it's all right here. It's happening right in your own backyard. So.
What is really amazing about this moment is that we're putting together the best of the Detroit Homecoming. The school that you attend is way overrepresented among this gathering of expats. The imagination, the success, and the energy that is invited back, that represents the best in creativity in Detroit. Cranbrook is the flagship, and so all the questions that you have, they welcome. They are thrilled to be back here to share all that they received when they were here. So we want to give you the intimacy and the time to spill out all of your thoughts and share your energy and just bring your questions to your group, which will break down right now into these categories, and our student leaders will take your group into your classroom, and students will to follow your student leader, and who will show you to the right classroom. So the students who will go to, who have tech entrepreneurship. Who are those hosts for tech and entrepreneurship? Stand up. And you all know where you are headed. So what room are you in? 107. Okay. So tech entrepreneurship students, please take
statistics, and he was able to leverage that with some probably serious investment into a business. I mean, who would have thought there'd be a stock market for sneakers, right? So as crazy as that sounds, that's become a huge business.
It's my great uncle. He's a stockbroker on Wall Street, and right now he's living in Florida, so he's got that going for him. I spent a couple of days with him and getting used to just some of the things he goes through on a day-to-day basis, and I really enjoy that.
I think that's one of the things that really distinguishes a business career from many other options, whether you're going to medicine or you're going into academia or something. I mean, if you're a business person and you're going to be successful, you have to have the stomach for risk. You won't have certainty about whether your decision is right or wrong until much later on, and you have to be willing to sort of develop the thick skin that it takes to be willing to take risks.
I'm the same as her, actually. I'm into medicine a lot, and my mom's a nurse, and she always tells me that, especially nowadays, medicine and business interact so much. So it's always good to know more about business, and so I just ventured into here because I thought this group was interesting.
Nursing, had a nursing degree undergrad, decided that she didn't like being a nurse day to day. She went to law, she went to Michigan Law, and now she's working as kind of general counsel for a hospital. So people that have kind of combined different types of jobs within medicine, and ultimately those two expertises got them to where they want to be.
I also feel like as a career path, it's different than medicine where you know your next 10 years of how much school you're going to go through. With business, you'll change business jobs all the time. I don't know how many jobs you guys have had.
You get exposed to so many things that you can say, wow, there's a hole over there. I had to build a company based on that hole in the product offering or something like that. So I was fortunate enough to go work at Oracle 20 plus years ago, and that has bought me so much goodwill, going forward, that it was definitely very, very valuable to put.
Growing up for me, there was no tech really, So what's one thing personally in your experience that you think would be something helpful to have in your tech industry? So it could be, I don't know, like Lyfts or Ubers are kind of what, for me growing up is what I used, but a thing that you could see being produced and actually working in your kind of life, I guess you would say.
That's tough to say. I mean, I think one of the big challenges here is that as expats, we come back in frequently, and so part of being an entrepreneur and identifying these opportunities is that you immerse yourself in something and then you find where those pieces are missing. So in that regard, you having grown up in Detroit are probably more qualified than us to tell us where that opportunity lay. Because if you look at Amazon's HQ2 bid, if you looked at a number of other corporate headquarters, they all received bids from Detroit, and the companies replied and said, you don't have public transportation.
I look forward to 10 years from now, Silicon Valley isn't necessarily the center of the tech universe. It's one of many, right? And because entrepreneurs in Detroit are going to identify their own problems based on their own experiences. So I think there's so much opportunity around the tech centers moving to other smaller cities.
There's an entrepreneurial opportunities. How do you educate the populace to move into positions that don't require you to stand and put a nut on a wheel all day, and require you to be able to fix the robot or program the robot or design the robot that puts that nut on the wheel. And so the educational level has that. So there's an entrepreneurial challenge for people is how do you improve education in Cranbrook and the city.
the human element, the human capital. And today we had a great presentation from the new president of Harvard University, who is from Detroit. He's from Pontiac. He did not go to Cranbrook, but what he did say was how undervalued, he feels that teachers are in our country, and how important a role they played in his life.
So, make sure you explore this place fully while you're here. And then the second is, I think because of that and just the holistic approach here and how it is the whole person so much, I have lifelong friends from here that are my best friends still, that we travel around the world and run into each other and still bond and have that. And I think you don't find that at least when I talk to other friends from other circles of mine, they don't have that, and it's really tight. When we gather here and get together even for something like this, you have that bond. It's incredible. It'll last your whole life.
I learned how important it is to know the true story that every single person I went into a class with, went to a practice with, has. And the students here taught me, just by being with them and experiencing what matters to them, how important it is to ask somebody about their story. And then the other one was from my mentors, not just teachers and coaches. Question everything. That we talked about that earlier this week. Cranbrook is where I learned that don't just take everything as fact. Question it, see if there's a better way. Maybe it's the best way already, that's great, but at least question it and try to explore what all of the different things are around whatever the issue is.
These are the sacred Cranbrook values that you heard from these panelists about joy, happiness, creativity, passion, because that's where it all is. And the ones who live those words are the ones who have brought back these incredible stories. Please help me thank our panelists. Have a great weekend.